Okay, so this is a little bit awkward. I feel bad because I am now coming back after a 3 month break and I gave no explanation as to why I left. And I cannot give any explanation as to why I left. But all I can say is that I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with everything in my life. But however, now I am back. And yes, I may not be posting every single week, but I'll be posting as much as I can. Hopefully, towards the end of the year, my life will be looking a lot more normal than what it is now. But I basically just want to say thank you to everybody who's been listening. Since I've had my break, I've noticed that there was still a few downloads when I was gone, so I very much appreciate you. And if you're still following along, thank you. This interview is with life and sex coach Lydia Feldman. We did record it 3 months ago, so there have been a few little updates in my own life that I have said. I now have a boyfriend, and he is fantastic and not avoidant. But yes, I wanted to preface this by saying that we are going to be talking about sex, and we do talk about trauma a little bit as well. So that's just, if that's going to trigger you, this may not be the episode for you. But Lydia Feldman is an incredible woman. She helps couples and individuals explore sex, their sexuality, and basically just find a more comfortable way for them to orgasm. And of course, if you are a family member of mine, there are some personal stories in here of mine, so this may not be the episode for you. So, without further ado, here's the interview. Hey,
Hi.
how have you been?
Good, good. I've been kind of in this like transition with my business where um like gearing things more for like in-person events and possibly opening a retail space so it's like more community based and I mean my goal is to open a sex truck which is like a mobile. Have you seen those like uh, big box trucks that like are converted into retail spaces for like farmers markets and stuff? But I want
Yeah.
it to be like an ice cream truck, but for sex toys.
I love this.
Um, and then it could be like also for parties and for festivals and for events and workshops and burlesque and all the things.
Oh, fuck yes. Oh my God, I love this. Do you have a name yet?
Oh, that's for like the business or for the truck?
For the truck.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh, I have been like thinking Valentina or
Mm.
something along these lines of like, but basically I wanted to like be like a disco ball, like a giant disco ball, silver
Love.
bullet type
I
type.
love this.
Yeah. So
I Valentine is actually the name that I would name my daughter. So you should
what?
totally name Valentina. Yes.
Isn't that
Yes.
such a beautiful name? I met
Such
some
a gorgeous
people in
name.
yeah, I lived in South Florida for a while and there was a lot of Colombians and Venezuelans and I just met a lot of Valentinas. I was like, that's a name you can have. That's amazing.
So beautiful. Like you always pop up into my mind whenever I see anything. So I'm always just like anything related to like sex and like orgasm stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, Lydia.
It's so funny. I was talking to a friend of mine before this call, or just messaging back and forth, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have an interview with like the coolest artist." Oh my gosh, I feel
Ah!
honored to be like in your world too. I'm always like, if your stuff ever comes up, I'm like, "Oh, so good, so good." And just
Thank
like I
you.
feel like the way you show up is vulnerable and honest and like true in so many ways, and I think that's really rare, you know.
Yeah, especially on social media. I think a
Yeah.
lot of it's very fake. Are you ready to jump into your first question? I have a list of questions here and we'll see how the conversation goes. I'm sure we're going to touch on them, but I ask everybody this. So tell us who you are and what you do.
Mm, such a great question. And also complicated as my business is morphing and evolving. But I'm Lydia Feldman. I am a sex and pleasure coach, which means up until now, I have really done a lot of one-on-one and small group work with primarily women. And a lot of the work has been in marriages that are sexless or like really struggling to rekindle or respark. And then another fun sect of my people have been like single, dating, queer, trans, just kind of figuring out sexuality on a really personal, individual level. So in that department, I work a lot with like mindset work and embodiment tools. So some of that's tantric work and some of it's breath work, some of it's movement. And I would say my style is like a little irreverent and light and fun, and just like, how can we have more fun in our bodies, in our sex life, of course, in our relationships, and just like the way we view living in the world. So if I could say like maybe part of my gift to in this body and this human experience is to be like bringing lightness and fun and air and fire. It's like a little more spark.
Elements.
Yeah. So, but now as like I've been kind of transitioning, I think like 3 years of being in my business, like at home on my computer through COVID, I was just craving so much more like in-person hands-on work, and also being in community. So I've been planning and doing more sex parties and workshops, and I'm just like living in my best sex life. So yeah, just thinking about how I can be more interactive in my communities too. So yeah, some of that's like traveling. I'll be doing some like in-person retreats around the world, which is fun, and possibly a retail space, which I don't even know. Is retail even a thing anymore? People are like, oh, there's no money to be made in retail. I'm like, okay, but who doesn't want to buy sex toys from me, from a magical location? And as I was saying before, I want to have a sex truck, which is like an ice cream truck, but for sex toys and parties and all the magic. So always full of ideas, that's for sure, over here.
Amazing. So where are you based?
I'm based outside of Sacramento, so Central California. I'm like kind of in the foothills, so between Tahoe, if you know where Tahoe is, and Sacramento, but like Northern California.
I do know where Sacramento is because one of my favorite bands, Deftones, is from Sacramento.
Oh, so good.
And yeah, I think Sacramento's on the map. There's been some pretty great things that have come out of there. And the next great thing is going to be Valentina.
Oh, Valentina, my sex truck.
Yeah.
So if y'all can just imagine like a UPS truck or like a big box truck that is bedazzled with like a bunch of tiny mirrors, like a disco ball. And then there's like a ladder that goes up from like the ground to the top. So there's like a rooftop champagne bubble bar. And then on the inside is like sex toys and lingerie and a stripper pole. And then on the outside is you can like create like a lounge area. So I'll be at your local farmer's market. Keep your children at bay.
So can you smoke weed legally in Sacramento? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that'd be amazing if you could partner with like a weed company.
Yes.
Because now I see there's all these like CBD lubes coming out and stuff. So
I haven't tried any of those before. Okay, that's my next thing. My next purchase. Slew of purchases. But.
So how did you get into being a pleasure and sex coach?
Great question as well. I feel like I have had a journey coming into my sexuality. So I grew up like very conservative Christian, like not politically conservative, but like very religiously conservative. And so sex was like no sex before marriage. I went to a very conservative college where it was like you could not have sex. I mean, I was having sex, but with a lot of guilt. And so even though I think my personality was always interested in and like curious about all things sex and pleasure and play, I think my actual experience had so many rules and like headiness about it So after I had my kids, I have two small kids, well, 9 and 5. So after my son was born, I just was postpartum depression and just didn't feel connected to my body or my life. I was I was very determined to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was also making me very miserable. So I basically just started like trying to figure out how to incorporate more pleasure in my life. And I knew sex was like complicated for me, and it was like a trigger point. Like I just had zero sex drive, which I think is also common for young moms, new moms. But there was a point where my husband got me a vibrator, and I literally started crying. I just was like, and it was actually a really nice vibrator. It was not a cheap one. It was really cool. One of my favorites in the end. But to me, it was just like, I'm doing sex wrong. I don't have any sex drive. I'm horrible at this. I'd have to force it. And I think at that point I was like, all right, this is something I'm willing to work on and something I'm willing to like really be more conscious about. And so I just started like, and I was training to be a life coach anyway. So I was coaching already, but I just became slightly obsessed with like, how can I be in my most pleasured states? And so the way I actually usually start with most clients, and the way I think it's like most helpful for people, is to just be like seeking pleasure more than like fixing your sex life, or more than like trying to like understand and decode all of your sexual habits and patterns and blocks. And I think just being present for pleasure and present for like, what do I actually like and want, and what feels good in my body? A lot of times that's actually really hard. And finding like ways to like get back to yourself for what you want and like and need. So and I feel like I'm still learning in this too. It's like I feel like I meet people who have just totally different habits and perspectives on things, and I'm like, wow. So I'm like, I'm an aspiring slut in a like hetero monogamous like body. I'm like,
no, I love
I'm trying to break all the barriers. I'm like, so we opened up our marriage. We opened up our like just kind of like rules on how to be with each other and with other people, and exploring polyamory and just parties and ways to like discover more about myself. And so there's no one way. There's no one way to have pleasure. So
no,
I'm
totally.
Just for sure.
But I'm just going to say the vagina is such a mysterious thing.
Mm-hmm. I was sexting with a gentleman recently, and he called it the love canyon. And I just like started laughing because I was like, that's not sexy to me, but it's so funny and endearing. Your love canyon.
The love canyon.
It's vast and mysterious.
Actually, I want to jump off subject again. I'm wearing noise canceling earphones. But anyway, what do you think about squirting?
Oh, I love it. I love it when I can. It's been a journey. I did not think I could. And I was like, oh, this is like a challenge that I'm like willing to like fight hard for. And I think, speaking of like blocks and being like, oh my gosh, now there's so much pressure. Any guy that was like, oh, I need to like, I'm gonna get you to squirt. I'm like, I feel like that's a lot to ask. And my husband too, like trying to do it. So I've only really squirted once with a magical man that knew what he was doing. But I don't think it is magic. I think it's very clear. Like I can feel like it's like there it is very technique and like the willingness to squirt. I think that is the biggest thing. Because I'm like, I want to squirt, but like in my body, it feels uncomfortable, So I was like,
yeah,
I have to like let myself go enough to have that kind of orgasm or, release. But so I'm not always in the mood for that, I guess.
No.
I'm like, no, I want to always be that person that can do it and be impressed and impressive. But I think in real time, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do, I don't know. And then I clamp up, you know?
Yeah.
But, like, is it real? Like, I think, I mean, I'm like, I think it's fair to say it's real. It's happening.
Yeah.
There's technique. There's a G-spot. You can, like, stimulate the urethral sponge and have liquid come out. And I think, you know, I went through a phase when I was like first getting into like sex coaching where I kind of, and I was also training with people who kind of had this mentality too, where there's like good orgasms and bad orgasms and the kind of like the right way to do it and what you should be doing and divine feminine and divine masculine and like the ways you should be. And I think even like becoming a sex coach, there is like an unlearning or like working on your sex life, whatever, an unlearning of like what I should be doing, like the right way to have sex and the best way to have orgasms. And oh, is a clitoral orgasm like less than a, you know, cervical orgasm where you see God? Or should I be like having more anal sex? Or should I be having this and that? And all of those questions come from your brain, come from like a thinking part where you're analyzing and judging and critiquing and I mean that's like how we're cerebral beings. That's always going to be that way. But I think like for me the work is always like what do I feel in my body and what is that experience? It doesn't have to be so heady. And so for squirting it's like the experience of like having to pee. It feels like you have to pee. There's pressure on your like you know, you hook it in, it's like right behind your pubic bone. That's right between your bladder and your pubic bone. And so you're putting pressure and it feels like, I don't want to fucking pee the bed, but also there's stimulation, it's happening. So, you know, like there is a sensation of like, this is uncomfortable, but kind of good. It's like scratching an itch. And am I willing to let it all go? And I think there's a symbolism there of like, can I let it go and be present in my body for whatever direction it takes? It might be uncomfortable. It might be ecstatic. And, you know, all of it's just part of your body and like your relationship and who you're with. And when I bring it back to like, what am I actually sensing and desiring within my body? And in that moment, there's so much less judgment of like, what he's thinking, what I'm thinking, what they're thinking, what I should be doing, what I imagine the night to go like, or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So if you can squirt, awesome, keep going for it.
Yeah. Oh no, I remember one of my girlfriends messaging me when I was like 18, maybe 19, being like, "Oh my god, I just squirted," and I was like, "Damn!" I was like,
yeah.
And then here we are now. I'm like hitting my 30s, and I was like, "Oh wow, that was incredible!" Like,
yeah.
Don't like that surprise though. Like, I'd like to have some towels down. Like, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Be like, okay, well, this is why people have waterproof sheets. Like what? Yeah.
Yeah. So what are like the main things that you do as a sex and pleasure coach with clients?
Yeah. Well, it kind of depends on the client really, because some people are like, I'm not in a sexual relationship. I want to date. I want to find my soulmate. And I feel like sex is part of like dating and I am nervous about it. And I feel like it's getting in the way. Should I wait? Should I stop? Should I like a lot of, again, rules and like how to be. So, and then some people are like, I'm in a long-term partnership and we're just like not wanting the same things, or I have low desire. And so there's kind of a range of like what people are actually working on themselves. So there's that kind of all falls into like the talking, like if you could think of like talk therapy kind of, of like what's going on in your head? What are the stories that you carry around? What are the rules in your head and the like, the complications that are going on? Essentially, you know, it's like, what are your thoughts and feelings about sex and your partnership and your body and the way you are in the world? So, and then it's kind of like, how can we actually think less and analyze less and be like working in the brain, doing journaling prompts and worksheets or whatever, and just be in your human animal body that actually is very intuitive, that's that has a very clear sense of what to do next and what feels good. And that intuition piece doesn't always make sense with like the talking it out piece, the brain and the body. And so for like getting people in their bodies, that can sometimes be like erotic dance and erotic stretching. It can be meditation. I have like a guided pussy meditation series where it's like basically a guided masturbation, but it's like being in this like tantric space of just flow and touch and sensation that sometimes can lead to orgasm, but really that's not the point. It's like just being in sensation. And that could be also like types of breath work too. Let's see. And I think just like playing in your life. So like on a sex coaching call, we might like do like 75% talking of like what's going on, and then like some movement or breath work or something. And then it's like, okay, I'll see you next week, but like, let's put something like as homework of like, how can you like really embody like what we've worked on in this call? And that could be like what you're wearing on your body. It could be attending a party. It could be planning a solo date where you just are like in pleasure for yourself. Yeah. And honestly, I'm just kind of like in spaces with that client. I'm just like, what does this relationship, me and my client, require? And kind of, I don't know, improving as we go of like, oh, what's next? Yeah, what's coming up for you?
Yeah. There's not one thing that fits everybody, I guess. Everyone's situation is different, especially when it comes to if there's like previous traumas or anything, or preconceived notions that they have, Yeah.
And I think too, like that's where it's like there is, the trauma pieces, which sometimes are just like require working with a therapist that's like trained in these areas that are more past focused and kind of like unpacking some of that. And I think like while my practice is trauma informed, I think like it's kind of, I often will work with clients that are working with therapists where it's kind of like unpacking like childhood things or young adult things or very traumatic things. And then kind of coupling that with like, how can we do this in a real time, like sex lab, where it's like, maybe not as complicated or as heady or like locked in the brain or locked in the like story of it. And a lot of sex coaches are also somatic coaches too, where it's like being in the body is releasing trauma, and bypassing the like words in like story of it in your brain too. But everyone comes with like their own patterns, and I think it's helpful just to understand where you're coming from,
There was this interesting episode on the group series that was on Netflix, and they were talking about, I don't know if it was the therapy ones that they did or if it was the sex one that they did. They did two that came out in Australia anyway. But there was this one lady who was like, if you're feeling disconnected from your vagina, you should get a mirror and you should like look at your vagina, get to know it, like, have a little look around, and then you should sit in front of a mirror and you work the outsides of your, I might say this wrong, labia. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah, I don't know. With an Australian accent, I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I say labia, labia.
Labia. I don't know. Tomato. Yeah. It's not a word I commonly say, but you work out the outside.
Now you will.
But you sit in front of a mirror and you just like work the outside of your vagina, and then you start to play around with it and you see what feels good. And I did that like after I watched this. This was like 3 years ago, and I did that, and I was like, it felt really weird at first.
Yeah.
But then like, I would be like, every now and again I'd check in with my vagina and be like, how's she looking? Like, hey, like.
Even right now, we all just kind of put your hands like on your pubic bone, kind of feel around, and then it's like breathing all the way down into your pussy, being like, hi, I love you.
So nice. Yeah. And I think like even just giving my brain and my body that kind of like, it's not two different things. Like it's all part of one. That was really nice. I really liked doing that exercise. That was nice. I like that breathing exercise. So cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like a combination of just not being educated of like, this is our anatomy. And even if it's like you look at like a medical book or something, it's like, yeah, you're kind of like, oh, that just is like the fallopian tubes. Okay. But you have no sense of like what that feels like in your body. Or like, this is like it's very sterile and it feels very different than like looking at your body, your hair, your weird bumps, or your like just like the colors of your lips, and you know, like what it looks like when it's aroused, what it looks like when it's fine, and like what it smells like, and what smells are a little off. And you're like, and I think as you become sexually active, like it's like your pussy is for someone else, and it's for someone else's pleasure, and it's for someone else's experience. And in the moments of like someone eating you out or something, then it's like, okay, now it's got to perform and be an orgasm for me, but also kind of for them. And I think like when you develop a self-pleasure practice and just like a self-awareness practice of like, this is what I look like, this is what it feels like, and you know, exploring the vulva in a way that's like really curious. And you know, so it's like, I think a lot of times like the way women interact with their bodies is very functional, and then when you want it to be sensual, it's kind of in service of someone else. So I like letting your own experience of your body be curious and sensual and explorative and functional. You know, I'm not saying like we always have to be like writhing in pleasure, touching ourselves. But you know, it's like, it's so interesting it's like having new partners or whatever. It's like your pH balance changes, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what's that weird smell, or what's that weird bump? And like really taking care of your body means like being very attentive, aware, intuitive. And you know, I always feel like little shifts, like a yeast infection or like little tiny shifts, oftentimes you will know intuitively before any symptoms actually even start coming up. I think like taking more ownership of like what's actually going on down there, both from like an internal place and like with the mirror externally, what's happening, feeling inside. I think we get really squeamish around it, or like someone else's responsibility, my doctor, my partner, whomever, like they need to tell me what's going on. And chances are you probably have a sense internally.
Yeah.
If we're more aware of it, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and also buy condoms like every 6 months. That's what I do.
Yeah. And be prepared in all of your bags.
Yeah. And
I was at the gym and I was like going through my bag. I was like, oh crap, I forgot my my workout top or something. And I didn't have the right things for the gym, but it was also my like weekending bag where I had like a flogger in there, and I had like condoms, and I had lube, and I had a vibrator. I was like, I've got a lot of stuff in this bag, not for the gym, but
I got everything else.
I guess I'm not wearing a shirt today.
Yeah, hey, why not? How can we get more turned on?
Great question. Yes. Such a personal question, and it's a question that keeps evolving as you get to know what you like and want more and more. So I might start with a question of like, imagine like the hottest sex you've had, or a situation where you were like, you actually were just naturally totally alive, alert, present, turned on, aroused. And from that point, I think there can be just like some investigation, like, all right, what was the environment happening? Like, what was the space? Was I at a hotel? Was I on vacation? Were we at like a really special dinner? Was it like the clothes that I was wearing? Kind of like the contextual clues that might be like adding to your turn on. And then like what was going on with that partner or that relationship or that person that I was maybe interacting with? Was it a sexual attraction? Were we in a really good place? Was it like the first crush kind of thing? And like my mental state, what was going on with the rest of my life? Was I stressed out? Was I depressed? Was I like obviously if you're really turned on, probably not, but like, was I in a good mental state where things were going really well at work and I had other relationships were really solid and I wasn't stressing about those things? And, because we think oftentimes that maybe like that person has to turn us on. And if our partner, especially if you're in a long-term relationship or you're not in a relationship, it's like, there's like a waiting sense, like I'm waiting to be turned on. And we actually have so much more control over our turn on than sometimes we're taught to believe. So for me, when I think like, what are these ingredients that turn me on? For me personally, a lot of it is aesthetic and like environmental. And so let's say I'm going on a date, like where I'm going makes a big difference. How I'm dressed, how I prepare for my date is important. That I want to be doing things that are really turning me on as I go, like the smells and the way I do my hair, my outfit and the lingerie. And because I want to be turning myself on pre-date and then like put myself in an environment where I am turned on by the environment. And then of course, like the way I'm interacting with the partner that I have, like, can I be stoking it and flirting and sending pictures or whatever it is that's like allowing myself to feed off this reaction of someone else getting turned on by me is a turn on for me. So I think like being really curious as to like, what are the cues that my mind and body are responding to that signal like green light, yes. And noticing then like, what are the blocks to that too of like, I don't know, when this guy talks about some other girl he's dating or whatever, that's a turn off. Or like, if you're like, it's like jumping into a cold pond. You're like, no, turn off. Nope, that's a red light. So those are the blocks versus the like go aheads.
So what's a polite way of saying to someone that's turning me off?
Yes.
Or do you just say that's turning me off?
Just say that. Be like, I'm gonna have to say no to this conversation. Yeah. As I said, I'm in an open relationship. So like I went on a date recently where I was like, this guy is amazing. And also I know about myself, like when I'm in that space with someone, I really want to feel like I'm the only person. When consciously I know like we're not exclusive. I'm married and you can date other people. But like him talking about like hooking up with someone else, I just was like, okay, this isn't working for me. I really don't. Let's talk about something else. And I think like you can redirect a conversation without shutting someone down to be like, hey, you know what really turns me on is to talk about my face. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
How amazing I am. No. But like redirecting the conversation in a way that allows you to still be kind of guiding. And I think honestly, like just knowing what those turnoffs are, being aware of like when your body feels shut down, when you feel triggered by something, when you feel distanced, and noticing the kind of partners that you might be choosing that might feel familiar, but not necessarily supportive, where it's like there might be a habit of dating, I don't know, let's say the bad guy that is like rebellious and super hot, but also totally avoidant and doesn't really
Oh
give
my
you,
God, you're like
and you're
saying my type.
yes, and then you're like, ooh, this anxious part of me gets activated. And like there can be patterns in relationships that feel familiar, but aren't necessarily like actually grounding and safe. They don't actually feel safe. They feel like a turn on. So I think like we associate turn on with like an alarm system that goes off, which can feel actually not always that great. So I think of turn on as like activating, but like you can take a breath and kind of lean back into yourself and think, okay, I'm turned on. There's adrenaline here, but I still get to decide what direction it goes. It doesn't have to feel out of control or scary or, like you can still say, these are kind of the boundaries that I want to put out there,
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to my therapist. And we were talking about why I keep going for these emotionally unavailable guys. And I don't know if you know about life traps or schemas.
No.
No, okay. So there is a test that you can do, which is a schema and life trap test, and it's based on, I think there's like 10 parts of your life, and they're the things that you keep going back to always. So it would be like abuse or neglect, or like pessimism, which was like my top one when I did this test last year. And she was like, well, Maddie, like some relationships, they activate those schemas, and that's why you keep falling back into it, because that's what feels safe to you. And I was like, you have an answer for everything. Like literally. And so and you were just saying that and made me think of that.
Yeah. You felt like knowing some of that like patterning, and then you can see the behavior that you are drawn towards. Have you been able to kind of unwind that enough to pause before going towards it?
Yeah. So now I know about the 3 different types of Maddies that I have inside of me. And I don't have dissociative identity disorder. It's like my protective mode, my subconscious, and then adult mode. So my subconscious is young Maddie. And so I now have these 3 parts that I can see, and it reflects all my relationships. So whenever like young Maddie's feeling like rejected, that's like the anxious attachment style coming out. And then I have my secure attachment, which is adult Maddie, who's like, no, we're good, we got this. And then I have my ultra independent one, which is my protective, which is like, I don't need anybody, it's all good, I'll just have a baby by myself, like whatever, like you know.
You don't need to call me back, I don't need emotions.
And so now I'm trying to figure out what each of these Maddies need in a relationship to feel secure and avoid anything that isn't that. And being able to be like, okay, intimacy isn't going to happen with this person, but they can still be a friend,
Yeah. And that's actually such a great point, because there's like seeing that pattern happen and be like, okay, this is not the guy for me. Like all the red flags are there. The writing's on the wall, and you can still have a strong desire for that person. You can have strong, like urgy, cravey, lusty, like, oh my gosh, I just need it and want it. And to hold space, which is so fucking hard. Okay, this is not an easy task. To hold some space, to like slow it down and be like, I can actually say no to myself in a healthy way, in a constructive way, and not just like always take the candy, like I can actually give myself a minute, and it's like very just like uncomfortable. It's delayed gratification. It's like giving yourself some like boundaries of like just getting the gimmes, and but it's like taking care of yourself and seeing it for like these patterns for what they are. And it's like, so if your inner child part, that young Maddie, is like feeling really desperate and needy and like freaking out, it's not like disciplining her, is in my mind. It's like not disciplining her and being like, no, you're being bad. Like you don't get the bad guy. He's like bad for you. No dates for you. And then like you're still feeling really needy. So it's like the tools to comfort that and soothe it, you know?
My self-care. So like, okay, so if anybody's listening and they want to know how I'm being able to figure out how to soothe that side, it's me taking care of myself and remembering, what did I like doing? Like I love doing face masks, skincare, my art. And it is that delayed gratification, because the whole time I have to hold little Maddie in my mind and be like, it's okay, I got you. I'm going to hold your hand. Big Maddie's got this now. And we'll do our face mask and we'll wash our hair. Then we'll go make some art and cook a nice meal. And then 2-3 days later, she's fine. And she's like, oh, we're so good. Like,
yes.
You know,
so like a real skill. I'm just gonna say like yes to that. It's a skill, and it's something that like consciously sometimes we're like, that is just a waste of time, and also I still want that thing, so I'm just gonna fucking do it. You know, which listen, if we do that, it happens. It's not like anything has like gone that wrong. We can still take care of ourselves. But I think like it when you feel like out of control, knowing that like you have the control to calm yourself, to soothe yourself, to take care of yourself, you know, and it takes work. And that's why I think like it's so much easier to disassociate and kind of like go back into whatever habit or pattern or substance is helping to soothe that. Yeah. You know, and then to be like, do it in other ways too. You know?
So the way that I structured it in so now I have 3 internal monologues, which are those 3 different modes. And it's me. It's like I was saying the other day to my therapist, it's like the devil and the angel.
Yeah.
And it's like me trying to be like, hey.
Yeah.
But it's like, honestly, I fucking love like now that I've been able to grasp that. And now I'm like trying to put it into practice. And with the way that these situationships go, I'm going to be practicing it a lot more, because they only last like a few weeks and then somebody like ghosts each other. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I am like constantly shocked by the amount of ghosting that happens, that I'm just like, what is people that are like the most surprising, that you're like, how did this like just totally, and I was reading somewhere that like ghosting is like a type of kind of like an emotional abuse because, and like coupled with gaslighting too. So you're like, are you ghosting me? No, I'm not ghosting you. No. But also like, I feel like you are. So it's like noticing that like internal reaction of whether that's like your own anxious attachment style or, you know, your big Maddie, little Maddie, like noticing where those voices are kind of coming from within yourself, to be like, okay, this is still me. This is me taking care of myself. It's listening to myself, soothing myself, noticing my own reactions to things, because God knows you can't control other people and the way they're doing their lives, you know.
Yeah, and also on that point, it's not a bad reason to ghost somebody who's toxic either. Like sometimes that's the only way you can get rid of someone. But what I've found interesting is that even giving feedback and being like, hey, look, we're not actually, I don't feel a connection. There's no chemistry, especially with guys my age. And I'm like in my 20s turning 30. But even guys, like I was seeing a guy who was younger than me, he hated that feedback. And he was like, what do you mean? No, I gave him feedback and I was like, hey, look, I don't feel chemistry. Like, it was really nice to get to know you, but like, I don't want to get intimate with you. You know what I mean? And like, he was like, why not? I own a house. Like, I have all this stuff. Like, why don't you like me? And I'm like, because there's no chemistry. Like, it's just, my body I just don't. Like, I like you as a person. And it was like this back and forth. And I was like, look, I'm just telling you this so that I don't ghost you. Like, just take it.
And I think it's like out of the norm, you know, like that kind of conversation is not the standard. But I think it's like starting to own what you like and want and what you don't want. And I think that it can be a very challenging conversation too, but So you're like, how do I want to operate in my relationships, in friendships, in situationships, in like intimate relationships, and in all of the capacities? How can I bring my half to that relationship in the way that I want to? So do I want, so sometimes, yeah, for sure. Some people you're like, I don't ever, we're just going to disconnect. Like,
Yeah.
but like the ways that you're like, how can I actually just be like my favorite person in the room? The way I interact and the way I show up and the way I communicate. And all of that, I do believe, comes from like, how are you taking care of those three voices in your head? You know, those three parts of like, they're all vying for attention. If you're not conscious of it, like one part will be like the loudest and the like bulliest or whatever, like the strongest voice in the room, and not always the most intentional, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because I've only just put a name to the face to the name of the protective mode, which is like 16-year-old Maddie, who was teenager and like hormonal and like, oh, I'm going to my room, like, you know, slamming the door. Yeah. And so now that I've got all that, I'm like, oh, now I know why I like to just like, because I've always thought I was an extrovert introvert, but now I realize that I'm just like, those are my modes talking. So now I know when I'm feeling like overburdened and I need to have a bit of disconnect time from like just the world, then I can be like, hey, protective mode, we're going to go sit in our bed for 6 hours and just watch TikTok. Like,
yes, that's what we need. That's what I've been looking for.
Yeah. No, honestly, like if anybody can look at like looking at modes, it's called part work. So it's based on Carl Jung's shadow work.
Yeah.
But this is taking it like a step further, and this is called part work. So working on all the little parts of yourself to heal your inner child. And but like you were talking to me last year and I was not in a good place. And now I'm like, I talk to other people and I'm like, oh, I can see your little child and I can see what's going on there. And like,
yes.
You know,
and so like in conversation. So like say you're texting someone, a new guy or whatever, and you can feel something in you that's like getting triggered or activated, right? Like that, like child and like the small Maddie that's like, I need you to, has he texted me back? Has he texted me back? Like, why, what's going on? What does that text mean? And like, it's like, you can feel that and you can recognize it as like, oh, this is something in me. When like, if you're not conscious of it, you're like totally focused on the other person as like, that person needs to text me and do this and this, which possibly that's true too. But it's like noticing like, oh, I need and want this kind of attention from this kind of person, because that chemistry actually calms the inner child too. And like, it's like a good match, which might not feel as dangerous and scary and familiar, you know? So doing the work, you're always like, oh my God, is anyone else doing this work? Because we need to get together. You're not doing this work. You're just
I'm talking to one guy. No, I'm talking to one guy who's very much like knows his attachment style.
Yeah,
has like fixed his attachment style. Like, and we were talking very openly about like, you know, different modes and things like that. And I was like, damn, like you are so good, and like I don't really want to fuck this up, and like fuck you, like you know what I mean? Like I'm like, maybe we're just meant to be friends, and if it happens, it happens. I don't know, but like there are those guys out there, but like I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
noticing like your inclination to wait for sex, though, I think is also really interesting. Sometimes it's based on like we're just not really, the chemistry's not there. But I think sometimes when you know that there is like a connection there, waiting for sex is, you know, like a green flag of like, oh, I actually don't feel the need to have sex right now, even though I am attracted to you, even though that might happen in the future, or like there's tension there. I actually want things to feel even more connected and less like physical, just like chemistry. So sometimes noticing that too is like, oh, I actually do want to wait. That's interesting. Oh, this might be different. This situationship might be something more that I want to like invest in, you know?
Yeah. No, totally. Totally. I was just thinking about something, but I won't say it. I'll just tell you after. Yeah. So, can you explain for us what is sex positivity and how can we practice this within ourselves?
Yes. I think that, like I said before, it's kind of an unlearning for a lot of people. I think we are born sex positive. You don't even think about it. Like the things that make you sex positive are like, this is my body. My body's actually neutral. Like it's just like part of who I am. And I enjoy moving in the world in my body because I just like I'm a human. And over time, we are taught to not have a positive interaction with our body, to change it, that it's wrong, that it's fat, that it's ugly, that it doesn't fit. It's not the right way of being. And there might be chronic pain in your body. There might be issues that are just like making the body wrong and bad and not good enough. And so to me, sex positivity is like, and it's not just the body, but like sex as well too. It's like unlearning some of these belief systems that we have that put us in our head, that overthink, that disconnect us from the natural, neutral place of just enjoying your body, of experiencing your body as it is. Like, oh, that's an interesting freckle here. To me, like, I think body neutrality is just as important as body sex or, body positivity, especially if you have a lot of negative thoughts about yourself. To me, it's like a big leap to go from like, I hate my body, I hate muffin top, I have to like, no flour, no sugar, I've got to like buckle down, into like, I love every sexy, beautiful curve, and I love my stretch marks and my saggy boobs and all the things. It's like, that's a big stretch. And so I think in the like sex positivity movement, I think sometimes we go into it being like, I got to be at that like destination, and being neutral can be just like, yeah, those are titties. I don't know. That's like the shape of, that's just my body. And I don't have to love it. I just am like experiencing it. And some other things I do love. I love the color of my eyes. I love the like perky little laugh or whatever it is that can kind of ease you out of like the trenches of your body. And I think like as you get older, unfortunately, there are more like aches and pains and like things that just aren't as perky, and like you're like naturally loving things differently. So, and as a movement, it's like, how can this also just be like, bodies are bodies, and we can celebrate and we can mourn and we can grieve things that change in our bodies. And it's like a living, breathing part of our lives that can be a full range experience. Sometimes negative, sometimes neutral, sometimes positive. But like when we're honest, like we live in such a toxic, negative body world, especially for women. And it's like, to recognize all the things that we just are taught that are so toxic. And like, I'll go through my Instagram feed and just notice how I'm feeling in my body. And I follow a lot of, a lot of sex positive, but also a lot of like bathing suits and lingerie and like pictures and images of women that are very sculpted and, where I just notice in myself where I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. My body's wrong. And it's like such a subtle, familiar place. I don't catch it oftentimes. But I'm like, I can't follow this person anymore, or I can't follow this account because I look at it and it's gorgeous harness wear or whatever, or like kink wear. I'm like, I definitely want that. But it's on a body that is so absurdly not normal.
Or just like unfamiliar, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to reach that.
Like,
I know the exact feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I'm like, I still want that harness, but when I look at that model, it makes me feel shitty. You know, like internally, I feel like a depression of energy. And so it's not necessarily like I'm like walking around being like, I'm an idiot. I need to like, I'm so stupid and I can't like, I can't eat this food. And, you know, just noticing like, where are the places where I feel lower, less than, slightly like icky. And even if it's coming from a sex positive place where I'm like, this just is hitting me in a weird way. And so it's like taking care of myself in that way is like, all right, censor some of those accounts, find places where that remind me that like the way my body looks and feels is totally fine, and dress to that too. So if I'm buying, let's just say, a kinky harness, you know, can I seek it out in a way that like feels good to me, you know?
Yeah, I get that. And I call my stretch marks tiger stripes.
Tiger stripes.
They're my little tiger stripes. Got them all over my boobs and my hips and stuff.
But I tell you, like, what, like, your brain will interpret what you're seeing as, for me, I'm very visual. So it's like, as like the truth, as the way, as like evidence. And so when I show myself pictures of myself that I think are beautiful, and granted, that is still coming from like a very like white, heteronormative, you know, like beauty standard filters are still so ingrained in there, you know, so what I think is attractive reflects my culture. But, you know, it's like when I show myself like awesome pictures of myself where I'm like, I like the way I look here. And it's not filtered, it's not like crazy or whatever. Or I show myself models that are really fun, cool, beautiful, full figure, all ranges of people where I'm like, that's badass and I like it. And I feel good watching this influencer who's like super in her body and charged and sexy and full figured or whatever it is, you know, they're queer and non-gendered. And I'm like, I love it all. I want to give my brain those images because it like helps to unlearn some of the like very toxic locks in my brain still, you know?
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. And I remember growing up when Victoria's Secret was really massive. And I had a TV in my room, a 16-year-old Maddie coming out. Yeah. I had a TV in my room and there was fashion TV. I don't know if you guys had that in America, but we had fashion TV, and every year I would wait for the Victoria's Secret fashion show to come out. And I was obsessed with Adriana Lima. And I remember Googling what her diet was when I was 16.
Yeah.
And following the diet
and bone broth.
And being like, I'm going to be this skinny. And I was that skinny until I was maybe like 23, 24. And then, of course, your metabolics change and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then for like a really long time, I got bigger and I was like, oh my God, I hate my body. And I was like drinking heaps, you know, it was really reflected through that. And now I love that all this body positivity is coming out and like sex positivity and things like that, because now it's like, no, like you don't have to be like Adriana Lima. You can.
And she probably has a terrible sex life. Who knows? Like she's probably dating like total D-bags. And who knows? It's like we associate like the perfect body with the perfect life, but it's totally irrelevant. Like,
yeah,
your experience of pleasure has nothing to do with like how big your hips are or the shape of your skin, or, you know, that's why I think like, how can I like I said, in the very beginning of my journey and where I start most of my clients, it's like, how does pleasure feel in your body? Like, when do you feel turned on? What are the like, what's the context that helps your erotic self come alive? Because I tell you what, it does not matter the body you're in, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're, you know, more weight than you've ever carried in your life, if you're on antidepressants, like the way you are in your body, when you feel that like internal light, that flame, that like charge, that interest, that activation. And to me, it's like a curvy energy in my body where it's like, it wants to be in movement, and it feels so good. And it will radiate like a magnetism that is so attractive. That's why you see any shaped body can be like hot as fuck, because they're in their body and in their pleasure, you know?
I love this. So what are your 5 tips for people who might be feeling flat? And I've written here the sex department, but maybe the pleasure department is better.
Yeah.
I feel like you've kind of touched on this a lot, but whatever your 5 tips would be.
Okay. Like feeling like they're in a low spot, both in pleasure. Yeah.
And in energy, I guess, because you've mentioned energy a lot as well.
Yeah. I think it's all related for sure, where it's like just relating to yourself, because if you have low energy, chances are it's going to be really hard to be super sexual. If you have, if you don't find pleasure in sex, or like if you're not having pleasure in your life, sex can be like a real leap to be like, no, it's very easy to be performative and, you know, not in it. So I think the first piece would be find your simple pleasures. And especially if you're like, I should be on a beach in Mexico drinking margaritas with like the hottest people ever. That's the life that will be pleasurable. And then you're like, that's not going to happen today or tomorrow or ever, maybe. So it's like, boil it down to what are my like most simple, delicious pleasures. And so if you're drinking your coffee or your tea or whatever, and it's like, can I just, like, I love this flavor. I'm going to taste it and like revel in it and like expand pleasure on a micro level. That might be, I'm just going to take a shower before bed because I love the feeling of like getting into clean sheets and like that, like, I'm horizontal. And so when I do that, I'm like, this is like the best part of my day. This is better than sex. I mean, sex is great too, but also like things that you actually know very quickly that you're like, oh, yes. So find your simple pleasures and expand them. I think, okay, number 2 might be, think of those questions that we talked about earlier of like, what are my turn-ons? And like, if that's like level 1 pleasure is like smell your coffee that you love. Number 2 would be like, all right, let's think about what actually are the ingredients of arousal and turn on for me. And those are going to probably play off some of the simple pleasures in your life anyway. But, you know, it's like thinking about what are the times in my life that I've been really happy, really turned on, I feel really special in my life. And pulling up some of those, you know, like what are those ingredients? And can I give myself a vacation? Can I give myself that pampering? Can I give myself the space to be that woman that is turned on? And essentially turning myself on. I'd say for 3, it's probably communication. I mean, you can't really communicate what you don't know. So if that in relationship, if that's coming out a lot as like blaming or putting a lot of responsibility on your partner to take care of you, to turn you on, to want more sex or want less sex or different kind of sex, you know, I think communication starts with like communicating with yourself. What's bothering me? What is it that I'm needing? Is this little Maddie that's like needing some attention? Is this like teenage Maddie that's like, fuck it all, like needs some space. You know, like what do I need first? So then when I go to my partner or situationship friend, like I have a sense of like, I'm taking care of myself. So when I communicate with you, it's coming from that like adult place that's like, I really want you to text me back within the day. And if you don't text me that, that's your choice. But I really enjoy more communication or whatever it is. And it can come from like a more of a loving place, self-loving place at the very least, you know? If I could say also, maybe this is related to the first one, is like, for me, how can I have more pleasure? How can I have more fun? How can I say yes to myself more? And so I think of it as like, what's my internal fuck yeah? What's my internal like electric jolt that's like, that's a yes. And so when I give myself more pleasure, when I give myself more permission to be like, that's a fuck yeah, I'm going to go for it. For me, like I don't know if you know human design, but I'm a manifesting generator, which is like sacral. Yes, it's like gut feeling. And so, and not everyone, most people, you know, not everyone feels that like gut, like yes or no. But like tuning into like, where are the times where I feel that charged, like I want this. This is, yeah, whether it's ordering from a menu or it's buying a piece of clothing or it's like continuing in a relationship or ending a relationship. You know, it's like, what is the internal yes? And my brain might be like, don't go skinny dipping in the ocean. That's crazy. No. But like part of me is like, there's a yes here. I'm going to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Identifying and following your internal yes.
Okay.
That's 4. I don't know. Do I have another one?
Buy a vibrator. No, sorry.
Buy a vibrator. Yeah, let's just like keep it simple. Buy more toys. You can have so much pleasure, so much like experience in pleasure just by simply like touch, slow it all down, breathe into it. And then notice if you go into a sex toy shop or a van, a mobile truck somewhere with selling toys. When you go into those places, like what little things give you the like tingles? And that's your fuck yeah. That's your like curiosity. So, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, that butt plug looks so sparkly and cool, but I could never, I don't know. Talk to the person that works there. Get like, try stuff out, try sensations. And at the very minimum, get like a cute little lipstick vibrator and yeah, expand it.
I think we all started on the lipstick vibrator.
It's still my favorite, honestly. After like I have so many vibrators and toys, I have one that I'm like, it's just so steady. It's like I don't know if you know the company Dame, and they're just like really cute, and you can put them in your purse. They're discreet. You can travel with them. I'm like, yes, always.
Yeah, see, I like the womanizers.
Yes, those two, and that's why it's like you need to have this whole range and this whole conversation, like, how can I know myself better without experimenting and without pushing the line? You're going to cross the line. You're going to break some boundaries. You're going to like do things that you're like, that's a no. But
you might even squirt the bed. Who knows?
Yeah. And you're like, that's a no for now. But maybe I will keep trying. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. So funny. Well, Lydia, I don't have any more questions for you.
Yep. We're all done. We got them all covered. But I think like just exploring pleasure, that's like when I first became a coach, I was like, I want to talk about sex, but really my journey, and for so many people I know, it's like a pleasure journey, a journey in allowing yourself to be in pleasure, to experience where that boundary is, where it's like a pleasure cap, where you're like, I actually don't know how to receive more. And then we like self-sabotage and kind of like break up and do the things that you're like, I can't receive more money or abundance or pleasure. It's like all the same of like, can I be open to feeling good in a way that serves me, in a way that like actually feels good in my bones? versus like numbing or disassociating pleasure. So, you know, like, and then sex just gets to be the cherry on top. It gets to be the like the playground where you can like really deep dive. But, you know, it's like finding your own pleasure and your own sense of like what I want, that changes who you're going to sleep with. That changes how you interact with your partner, how you like deepen that relationship because you're doing the work yourself, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I do have one last question, actually, which is I'm going to put all your links in the show notes. But if people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yes. Well, I do most of my work on Instagram. I am Mrs. Lydia Feldman. And yeah, taking one-on-one clients, you can contact me through there. My website is Lydia Feldman Coaching. So that 2 different names, sorry, to be confusing there. But yeah, I am taking one-on-one clients, and last year I did a bunch of small group coaching. I might end up doing some more of that later this year. I'm doing a fantastic retreat in Madrid at the end of May, Memorial Day weekend. That's the May 27th. And so it's like an exploration of orgasmic energy and pleasure. And we'll be doing a workshop and then going and eating tapas and dancing. So,
oh my God, I love this.
These are the things that I'm like, this is what we need more of. Just being hot people.
I wish I could go to that. I wish I had money and I could go to that because that sounds incredible.
Okay, just sell some amazing artwork and we'll meet there.
Oh my gosh, I know. Oh, this cost of living crisis is killing me. Everything I want to do.
Too many things. I'm always like, God did not give me these desires to not give me the funds or the creative abilities. This is gotta happen.
No, totally. So thank you so much for coming on, Liz. You're the best.
So good, Maddie. It's been so wonderful to connect, and I will keep seeing you around the interwebs or Madrid or Australia. I'll come to Australia, then it won't be such a big ask.
No, I'll be in America sometime soon, I feel. Yes. I will be.